morning. You're watching Business World Live. I'm Danny Laurel, kicking off this morning's broadcast with fresh trade figures. You can see that on your screens here. Exports grew by 17.6% to $6.51 billion in June from a year ago, beating the estimate of a 9.7% growth. Now, month on month, the June export figure increased by over 30% from $5.89 billion registered in May. Data from the PSA showed that out of the top major commodity groups, 9 recorded annual increases, including electronic equipment, machineries, chemicals, and coconut oil. Only those that fell within the other mineral products group registered a contraction. Imports for the month of June rose 34.2% to $9.33 billion, bringing the trade deficit to $2.82 billion. Now, as NCR reverts to ECQ, motorists going in and out and around Metro Manila are strictly being monitored by the police. Each vehicle is inspected at checkpoints, and everyone is asked to present documents like IDs and employment certificates to prove that they are workers apors. Now, those who are not authorized to be outside their residences are urged by the DILG to just stay home or risk getting arrested. Interior Secretary Ed Años said they will be strict in implementing stay-at-home measures to curb the spread of COVID-19. This as the health department reported 116 new Delta variant cases, bringing the total number of the highly transmissible virus in the country to 331. Now, of these additional Delta cases, 95 are local cases. 1 is a returning overseas Filipino, while 20 others are still under verification as to their status. While there may be shortage of mobility, the local bourse is hard at work, moving stocks across the board. Now you can see on my terminal here, first of all, our index opening at 6553.19, that's up by 0.09%, and a couple of stocks to be watching out for here. First of all, AC Energy and Converge. They will be joining this coveted list that is, of course, 30 members of the PISA effective on August 16. They will be replacing Emperador, which is very interestingly the best performer year to date in the index. You can see that on my terminal here, as well as DMCI Holdings, which is also one of the best performers this year. I do want to check in on AC Energy, seeing whether they are jumping in terms of that announcement. Indeed, up by 3.09%. AC Energy now hitting above 9 pesos there. Another one to be watching out for are other, let's say, sectors, which will, of course, be having some shifting and changes. First of all, you've got RCBC that is going to be removed from the financials counter. Let's take a look at how RCBC is performing or opening this morning. It's still actually up by 3.8%. Meanwhile, you've also got others like the industrials counters having some changes here. You've got Alsons and EEI replacing Shakey's and Phoenix in the industrials index. In terms of the holding firms, which is up by 0.4%, you've got the Lopez Group to be exiting that index, as Abacor will be joining. And on the property side, you've got Arthaland and DM Wenceslao to be taken out of the property index, and Converge and PHA instead to be part now of the services index. And finally, on the mining and oil counter, Atlas and Mark Ventures and Oriental Peninsula will be joining the P-Mini index. Now, another thing to be watching out for here is the PSE now requiring the members of the index to raise their float to 20% from the current 15%. They will be having some time for this implementation of the new rule until December 2022. Now, note that all listings right now are already required to comply. And finally, just a quick check on our telcos sector here, of course, with Converge now joining the index with the big guys. We still do have the couple incumbents here to be watching out for, particularly Globe, which has just announced their second quarter income of 5.70 billion pesos. That's on the back of revenues at 41.36 billion pesos. You can see Globe sliding by more than 1% this morning. They had also mentioned that their first half net income was up by 13% to 13.04 billion pesos. And they did mention the board approved $356 million additional network projects for the second half of the year. And finally, still on the telco space, PLDT, which is down by 0.2%. This from their chairman MVP saying they are now open to selling their towers. They did mention they could gain significant financial gain from a sale. MVP says that a discussion with their bankers changed their minds, although there is no decision yet. They are to identify the towers that are not strategic to what they want to achieve. And while we are still in the thick of the earnings season, more companies are reporting higher profits. You can see on your screens here, San Miguel Corporation returned to profitability to finish the first half of the year with a net income of 29.6 billion pesos, reversing last year's almost 4 billion peso loss. This as all of its major business units posted robust recoveries. The company's top line grew by 16% due to higher sales generated by Petron, SMC Global Power, SMC Infrastructure, and San Miguel Food and Beverage. Meanwhile, ICTSI nearly doubled its profits for the second quarter to the tune of $106 million. That is on the back of $447 million in revenues for the second quarter, up 28% year on year. President Enrique Razon said profits rose as the volume of their port's operations already exceeded pre-pandemic levels. Now, the Energy Department has asked oil companies to provide fuel discounts to frontliners and other consumers. This amid prices of oil in the global market rising and the continued impact of the public health emergency. Now, Energy Secretary Al Kuzi also urged the energy sector to ensure the unhampered delivery of services in areas under ECQ. Recall that the DOE reported global oil demand rising, which resulted in crude oil deficits of 370,000 and 140,000 barrels per day in the first and second quarters of 2021. The department expects this market sentiment to continue to develop amid the global market factors. It's day one of a 2-week hard lockdown in the capital, as well as heightened restrictions in other parts of the archipelago. Here to unpack what the direct impact on the labor force will be, we have with us ASEC Dominique Tutay of the Department of Labor and Employment. Good morning, ASEC, and welcome to Business World Live.
Good morning, Danny. Good morning, everyone.
Ma'am, we want to hear it directly from you. What is the impact of this 2-week ECQ, not just in NCR, but a lot of other parts as well of the archipelago? How many workers will be displaced and how prepared are we?
Okay, you have may noticed we have already reported around 178 establishments with 5,000 workers who have been already affected prior to the ECQ. That's based on the report July 30 until August 4. So we are expecting more companies to be reporting either temporary closure or undergoing flexible arrangements, and the worst could be a closure or a report of redundancy. So we expect that it will increase as the ECQ has already been extended, not just in NCR but in all in other parts of outside Metro Manila.
Ma'am, how does this translate to the figures that we have the last one for June, 7.7% in terms of unemployment? Does this take into, is this already, you said that this might still lead to permanent closures, but we're not too sure of that yet on how agile they will be. Is this 7.7 print, does this have a lot of risk for downside continuing into the third and fourth quarters?
Yes, you would see that, Danny, when we will have the labor force survey for the month of August, the results of which could be 2 months after. In the previous lockdowns that we have here, not just in Metro Manila, but outside Metro Manila or the NCR Plus bubble, the effect there was around 700,000 workers going to be unemployed in the between March and April labor force survey. So the impact of 2 weeks ECQ, and then that will be extended to MECQ, it would be around 400 to 700,000 for people who will become unemployed. And those employed persons, based on our records, about a million or 2 million are left out of their employment during ECQ period.
So, ma'am, you cannot say that we have steadied, no, from of course above close to 17% of unemployment that we saw last year. We thought that the worst would be over, and now we've had a couple of months at 7.7% single digits. You're saying what that this is likely to go higher, but how much higher? Do you have any idea of how much higher this can be?
Danny, let me explain. We are actually improving in terms of our employment situation after 2020. We have opened January labor force with about 4 million people unemployed, and then going down further to 3.7 million. But what we're saying, when lockdowns are imposed, then it goes again to about 4 million or even over unemployed persons. That's a relatively better condition than in 2020, but we do hope that there will be no more lockdowns, because if we have, say, a 2-week ECQ, then extended to another MECQs, not just in NCR, but also outside Metro Manila, there is really that ripple and lingering effect to our economy. What we can do is probably strengthen our healthcare system, and so that employment and also our healthcare system can operate with each other and put a balance. That's what where we're coming from, because 2 weeks ECQ would really make our economy down again.
Ma'am, are you already expecting po an extension either of the ECQ or, as you mentioned, MECQ? This has not been announced at all yet, but it seems that you're preparing for this eventuality.
Yeah, of course, based on experience naman, if we have an ECQ, it will not be graduating to GCQ, but there is still MECQ and then GCQ with heightened restrictions. And not when you have this quarantine, community quarantine level, there are certain industries that cannot really operate on 100% capacity. Though, so as I was saying, ripple and lingering effect in our economy and in our employment.
Ma'am, let's talk about the ayuda that you're requesting from the DBM. How much additional are you requesting for this 2-week period, or even, as you mentioned, expected to continue into MECQ? And what is the status? What is the DBM's response? Do we have the budget for that? And are you happy so far with the disbursement of the ayuda?
Okay, for the Department of Labor and Employment, Secretary Bello asked for 2 billion supplemental funds, and this will be for the formal sector. That's 5,000 financial one-time financial support. This is different from the government social amelioration of 1,000 per individual to a maximum of 4,000 per household. So we have submitted our request to DBM last August 3, and there is no formal response yet coming from the DBM, although we heard Yusek Kanda stating in media interviews that we have to utilize first all our remaining funds for the year. It was quoted that there's about 18 billion for Tupad, but the
Okay.
reality is we only have a little over 4 billion, and that's already been allocated in some areas that needs our assistance. So in terms of our funds during the Bayanihan 1 and 2, we were able to reach more than 4 million Filipinos, both in formal sector, informal sector, and also OFWs. And we have spent more than 21 billion in the form of financial assistance.
Okay, ma'am, apart from the ayuda, are you pushing for other assistance, particularly direct to the employers, so that they can continue, employing the people during this 2-week period? Is there any direct assistance for them for this ECQ?
What we're doing now, particularly when it comes to the National Employment Recovery Strategy Task Force and Employers Confederation of the Philippines Partnership on the Raising of 1 Million Jobs Project, is we are facilitating the vaccination program for the workers in the private sector. So as much as possible, we want that workers during the ECQ period be vaccinated.
Okay. Ma'am, can you just clarify, you're okay na po with this ayuda if it does get approved, this additional 2 billion if I'm not mistaken?
It may not be enough, Danny, but of course we know that our resources are also limited. So it's really, the DBM is really prioritizing in terms of the request of the different agencies.
Okay. And finally, ma'am, trying to end on a more positive note here, of course, it's going to be a very difficult period for all our workers. What is needed in terms of avoiding another situation like this, or at least protecting them from future job losses in the lockdowns? Are you working on upskilling of the labor force? Are we banking on the OFWs continuing to thrive abroad and to be able to help with our remittances here? What, ma'am, are you focusing on?
Well, in terms of employability of our youth, we have our ongoing programs, the government internship program, and also the special program for employment students, where they earn minimum wage and at the same time learning skills as well. But in terms of tying it up for those job seekers who want to get that opportunity in the labor market, we have partnerships also with the Technical Education and Skills Development Authority. What we're focusing more at the moment is the digital literacy of our job seekers, because that is what is demanded by the different sectors now who have that current vacancies in the market. In terms of the OFWs, there is still limitations in terms of deployment, particularly for our house healthcare workers, I mean. And therefore, we have to manage also their deployment, because we know that the situation here in the country domestically, we also need the services of our OFWs. For those who have been repatriated, we are providing reintegration program in the form of livelihood and various scholarship programs for their dependents, because they cannot still work abroad.
Okay, so digital literacy is key at the moment, but as you mentioned, hopefully using this 2 week lockdown to improve the healthcare sector and disburse efficiently the ayuda so that we can get back stronger, and hopefully lowering the cases as well in the meantime. Thank you so much for those insights, Asik Tutay of the Dole.
Thanks, Danny.
And that's a first look into the business day. Today is Friday, August 6, 2021. Catch Business World Live for the market close. That's at 3:15 p.m. today. I'm Danny Laurel. Mask on, wash hands, stay safe, Philippines. We are One News.